I'm like, what did I do?
Here we are. Welcome back. It's good to be back, relearning all of my switches. As I've said several times over, this is why I am not a DJ and why the universe will still not let me have a lowrider until I learn how to work buttons and switches. I am here today with Brenda Vaca, and we will introduce her appropriately in just a second. Some of you might not know me, so let me introduce myself. Rosanna Alvarez, here with the Hella Chingona Podcast, in conversation once again with Brenda Vaca. I love the internet. The internet lets us cross so many regions and make connections and stay connected and build comadrazgo even from afar. So it's a pleasure to have you back. For those of you that don't know, Brenda is amazing. And I know that word is highly overused, but the beautiful thing is that we're both poets here. So we can paint you a picture. So allow me to paint you a picture of Brenda's amazingness. Brenda is the owner, founder, creative force behind Riot of Roses Publishing House. Also, an author of, or I have it right here,
Oh,
Riot of Roses, the book of poetry. If you don't have it yet, allow me to introduce you to that beautiful production. I'll link it in the comments and you can pick yourself up a copy because why not? And while you're there, you can also pick up a copy of my book, but that's a topic for another time.
yeah.
Today, as promised, I told y'all we were going to be talking with Brenda about finding your mojo. And because we love to play with words, it's a play on the title of Brenda's next book, Buttons Finds His Mojo. Yeah, am I getting that one right?
You did, yes.
He finds his mojo, and it is freaking adorable. Your debut children's book on the heels of your debut poetry book. Can I speak English today? On the heels of establishing your own publishing house and doing wonderful things. So I'm gonna shut up for a second, and I'm gonna feature your screen so you can give them the additional layers of glow up because Mojo is about all of that and more. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Rosanna. Always good to be in conversation with you. Yes, much love to the technology. Um, what can we say? We're on the opposite sides of the state of California. I'm in Southern California. Much love to LA, but I do miss the Bay Area. And you're in Northern California, just south of San Jose, which was an old home of mine. So yeah, happy to be here in conversation, to be chatting with you all about my new venture, which is a children's book this time, a bit of a poetic children's book. It's inspired by true events. Our family cat is named Buttons, and this little book will be the first in hopefully a series. This one's called Buttons Finds His Mojo, and it's about a beautiful black cat who's usually very feisty and perky and has lots of confidence, loses his mojo one day. So I thought I would write something, a little something for the kids, not just in my life, but in our world, that have been battling so much with, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, especially in a post-pandemic world. And there's so much violence, in our world and in our schools in particular. And I know that can affect the spirit and the mentality and the emotions of our kids. So a little something to cheer up our children and also, bring a smile to their face and also maybe give them some coping skills. So that's a little bit about kids book. And yeah, it's going to be in the imprint of my publishing house, which is called Riot of Roses Publishing House, named after my first book. And the imprint for children's book is Oh My Gatos. Oh My Gatos Books. So stay tuned. That is happening. And shameless plug, currently in the last week of a Kickstarter campaign I launched about 3 weeks ago. I did a Kickstarter campaign to fund my publishing house and my first book, which was very successful. And my children's book campaign is definitely struggling with its mojo. So I appreciate you giving me the space, Rosanna, to chat about it and hopefully, send out the SOS to support this campaign and help bring more books to life. I also like to mention that Riot of Roses is publishing other titles in this coming year. And so I can chat more about that as well. I'm really excited, not mine. I'm publishing other poets, in particular adult poets. And so I'm really excited and honored to be moving in that space as well.
Love it. So what you might not see on your end there is that I'm flashing that banner right underneath while you're talking.
I
And
see
for
it.
the folks who see this little rider kind of breezing across the screen, that is the Kickstarter campaign. I pulled that link simply by typing in Brenda Vaca Kickstarter Buttons Finds His Mojo. And so if you can't get that whole link there because it's moving, type in those search terms and you'll bring it right up, and I'll be happy to link it in the comments and in my link tree as well. I believe in this project, right? Storytelling is important, and I think part of this general finding your mojo, right, alongside Buttons Mojo, is also coming into this storytelling journey. And I know we've had you on here before talking about just that, right? And since then, you've done so many things to amplify collective storytelling, individual storytelling, storytelling by BIPOC voices and mujeres in particular. So part of that mojo is, well, what gave you the audacity to go there and be like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do this. There are so many ways that we're able to tell our stories. And 9.99999 times out of 10, I hear people struggle with permissions, right?
Yes.
And people who don't need permission for anything else in life, this is our last holdout hesitation because it's so important.
Yes.
So if you wouldn't mind just elaborating a little bit more on your mojo, right? And you're stepping into those permissions and how you bring other people with you in that process. I'd love to hear kind of how your response has been shape shifted by everything you've done in the last couple of years.
Definitely. So yeah, for sure, I had to give myself permission. We've talked about that before on your show. I had you on as a guest on my Instagram live series, Friday Fire. We talk about that same thing, right? As mujeres, as chingonas in life, and then at times timid when it came to our own creative work, right? Our creative body of work. So, flashback, during that start of the pandemic, I gave myself permission, I think because I saw, maybe many of us did, my life flash before my eyes. I was in my early 40s, my 44 year, which is a builder year, right? 44, magical number 44. And I just, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, what are you waiting for? Why are you hesitating to live the dream of a writer that you've always wanted to do? You write all the time, yet you never share it with the world. And I really had to heal some of the trauma that affected my mojo as a writer. I had been on hiatus from publicly sharing my creative work for like 20 years. So it was like the longest mojo deficiency on record. I was just like totally down for the count as a writer. And even wouldn't call myself that. People that knew me for years when I started coming out as a poet, they were like, "You're a poet?" And genuine shock. People that had known me, of course, like old, my oldest, dearest friends, they knew I was a closet poet. But here I was, just with the fear of God in me, right? I'm like, what will be my legacy? What do I want to leave behind? And so it was just like direct marching orders from the universe to put myself out there as a writer. And it's been super fun and terrifying all at the same time, right? It's so challenging to be vulnerable and vulnerable on the mic in a very public way. But the more and more I've done that, the more my confidence in my voice, in my power, and my creativity has grown and blossomed. For sure, the imposter syndrome still makes an appearance. Every time I try to do something new and different and scary and out of my comfort zone, the nervios hit, right? We're going to get nervous. We're going to get stage fright. I was getting a little nervous today, like, oh my God. But I'm like, wait a minute. I'm talking to Rosanna, who I've known for years, and we've been connected, in this writerly journey. So I love the quote that says, do it scared, do it anyway. I'm paraphrasing and botching the quote, but that for me has really been a motto. Do it scared, do it anyway. Jump out of the, or, fly the plane as you're learning to build it. That's what I'm doing with my publishing house. Don't tell any of my writers. I told them that very specifically. Like, we are learning how to do things as we move forward. And, a lot of my professional life has been doing that, experimenting, building systems, fostering growing communities where there were not communities. And so for me, it's just more of the same of that, but in my passion place, which is as writer, as storyteller. And, we, our communities have been so silenced, and we have not talk about undocumented people, but we have undocumented stories over the generations. To me, that's really the driving force.
Right.
How can I document as many of these stories as possible, mine and others?
And that documentation is important, right? I feel like I talk a lot on here about legacy, and that documentation isn't just to say, okay, we're somehow more qualified to tell our stories because it's written, but there's something about picking up a tangible work, holding it in your hands, sharing it with someone across the table, being able to gift this thing. And don't get me wrong, I read digital books. Shoot, my book's going to be available digitally. Yours is too, right? And it's like, but there's this thing about having this recuerdo, this little space on the shelf, right? And the more of us there are on that shelf, the more space we're taking up. That's reflective of how we exist in the world throughout time. And there's something about leaving that tangible kind of recuerdo out there that then has its own life and finds itself into so many hands and stories, and people then layer their story onto that story. And that, right, for me speaks volumes about legacy and disrupting an archive that insists on saying, there are too many of you to have you on the shelf. And I'm like, really though? And I think that's where the beauty of presses like yours, publishing houses like yours, come into the mix, because we're disrupting those ideas about we have too many of those, right? I bring this up often. Vanilla, nobody ever says too many variants of vanilla. You get vanilla with crumble in it, vanilla with some more sugar in it, vanilla that looks more yellow, right? Vanilla that's pronounced vinea. So I always think back to that when it comes to permissions. And this context of imposter syndrome being, it's not about us and our doubt, it's about the things that hit on us every day, those pedradas, even if they're not hard rocks, they still sting, they still scar, they still weigh, right? They still weigh. Tiny pebbles, you get so many of them and they're heavy. And we're navigating all of that as we go. And you're building space. And you're like, all right, there's no room on the shelf for us. We have our own shelf. What's up? I brought it. Like, where am I going to park? Let's go.
Exactly. And we're the shelf builders, like our gente built the shelves and casas, literally. So why not?
And y si no, al aire libre, we got this outside. We can read outside. It's a beautiful way to share poetry and children's books. But I do want to get to the heart of Buttons, right? And so I can't wait to hold Buttons, Finds His Mojo in my hands. My kids are grown. Not like fully grown, but they're definitely beyond children's picture books. And still, we spend a lot of time in that section of the bookstore or at the book fairs because there's a magic that those books hold. And I'm drawn to them as a grown woman in the world, right? And I'm like, I want these picture books for me. And so I still buy them. And my kids are like, for what? And I'm like, we have nieces and nephews, but also for me, right? And there's something about writing to that audience, writing to that group. How was that process for you? And then I'm going to layer on another question here because, I can talk. So I'm trying to break up the me talking and leave it all to you here. But the part where I'm like, I'm already interpreting Buttons Finds His Mojo as like Brenda embraces her mojo, kind of parallel story going on. So I'm curious about the inspiration behind it and the message you're hoping that, it reaches audiences starting at those early ages. But also, fact is, children's books, adults read those books to kids often. So they're they're intergenerational as is, right? So if you
Mhm.
could talk a little bit more about that parallel kind of story happening, if you would.
Oh yeah, for sure. So the process of writing the kids book as opposed to very adult context poetry was definitely a shift. So I had the opportunity to serve as a teacher assistant in a children's book writing class, which was the same community that I did my poetry writing manuscript development in. It's a program in South Los Angeles called Community Literature Initiative, founded by Hiram Sims, and his wife Cherie Sims is an expert in early childhood development, founder of a preschool. She has written a children's book herself, and she teaches this class annually. So they needed a TA. I volunteered with the understanding that I would have the opportunity to write a kids book. So I definitely, this was right on the heels of me putting out my poetry book. And I think I needed, although I'm still writing poetry and still was writing poetry and definitely sharing and performing my poetry. It was the first year again that my book came out. So I was out there promoting and having adult conversations, but weekly I was gathering with this cohort of very talented educators. A lot of them are educators, storytellers, artists that had a heart for writing literature for children. And so every week I went back to my old childhood self, right? The visits to the library, the way I fell in love with literature as a kid. I always talk about the inspiration of my parents as my favorite storytellers. In their case, they're oral storytellers, although my dad is working on a collection, so I'm excited about that. But I had to shift gears and really think of who my audience was and who was I writing for. And you know here we had a family cat, and cats are traviesos, as we know, and fun and playful and always have stories. If you're a cat person or a pet person, a dog person, I'm historically a dog person, you're going to be inspired by the animals in your life. And I remember seeing my niece Carla in particular just falling in love. She doesn't have cats. They're not able to have um, cats in the home, but I remember seeing her falling in love with Buttons, and her eyes lighting up every time she saw him. And she loves stories, and I remember telling her and my nephew stories when they were younger. And so it was just kind of shift, my gear shift had them in mind in particular, my niece and my nephew, and my other nieces and my other nephew when they were younger. They're all in their 20s now and late teens, right? So they don't, they're on a whole other level. But I had those young people in my mind when I was writing this book and wanting to again provide something for young people that could be a boost to their spirit. um Uvalde happened when I was in that writing class,
Mm.
and it just, we were together for like 3 hour workshop, and we just, it was all virtual. We just, we cried, we talked about the importance of having stories for our children that are meaningful, um, that can address hard themes. And so the Mojo story, although playful and fun, and it's a cat as a main character, it's set in a barrio, you know.
Mm.
It uses that cute caricature that children love. I think young children in particular. So talking to young children about hard themes. And it also has the stars of abuelos in it. So there's brown bodies.
Right.
Representation matters. We hear that so much. So yeah, there was that's how that shift happened. And in terms of embracing my mojo as a writer, I mean, everything that a writer puts on the page, to a certain degree, a reflection of them is going to be in it. So
Mm.
I battle with my confidence as a writer all the time. I take into account systemic issues. Buttons is a black cat. We can talk about how black cats are just demonized and never adopted in the shelters, and terrible things happen to them, in the Halloween season. And, so all these very adult things that happen in the human world, if we're talking about colorism, for example, we can parallel that, to a certain degree, to even to an animal, right, to this character. So I wanted to complicate it that way. If Dr. Seuss can do it, any of us can, right?
Word.
Talk about these hard themes in the context of for children in a way that they can understand, and maybe years later it's really going to absorb into their mind. But that's kind of what I had in mind. And yeah, the parallel of Brenda embracing her mojo, and turning into a crazy cat lady at the same time is definitely in this story.
Right. And I'm gonna link to the Kickstarter in the comments, but again, right?
Super
there. Yeah, go for it. Searching for it on the Kickstarter will, bring it up. Brenda Vaca Kickstarter, Buttons Finds His Mojo, and I'll link to it in the comments. But it's just beautiful. I was trying to figure out right now as you were talking if I could click through the screen shares, and I'm like, for the life of me, I can't figure it out on this platform. But I will definitely be putting them out there. We did include a little snippet of the cover alongside the cover thumbnail for this event. And you can see that even alongside the story, the illustrations, right, just have their own sparkle, their own magic, and their own spirit of collaboration and interpretation. And I think that as a person who is multifaceted and part of my artistry includes visual art, there's a story that's often told visually that isn't always captured in words. Mm-hmm. And there are parts that the words then complement with the visuals. And then there are still parts where we become a part of that story as a reader. And so I feel like a lot of what you're doing is using this black cat to conjure up a different kind of magic, right? To kind of reclaim the imagery and the stories and the lore around black cats and people of color by extension, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot to be said about how we navigate our spaces, how we navigate our barrios, our comunidades, our familias, right? And this kind of recovery of mojo that we kind of always have had, right? And I can't wait to just see and connect to how much I'm already layering onto the story, coming alive on the pages and talking back to me and whoever it is that I'm reading this book to, right?
I love that. Can I talk about the artist really quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh my God, I would be like absolutely terrible if I didn't. So the artist, I found the artist on Instagram. I love following not just writers, but also visual artists. I do not have the gift of visual art, at least not that I have discovered as of yet. And I just follow so many different artists that are just beautiful, colorful, engaging, vibrant. And this particular artist, her name is Suci Ananda. She's out of Indonesia. She goes by Succulent Floor. And I've been following her for a while and was just a fan of her work. She does a lot of portraiture of different colored people, different sizes. She focuses a lot on like the power of the feminine, and so that's what drew me to her. But it's also very like, it's definitely like digital illustration. And there was the one time she posted a cat, and I was just like, that is the cutest freaking cat I've ever seen on just drawn, So I'm like, I have to reach out to this person, see if she's willing. And I didn't know where she was from. I didn't know who she, I'd never really engaged with her personally, but she was willing to work with me specifically around this Kickstarter. Not a lot of artists will necessarily go into a collab with that caveat, right? So we signed a contract together. We had an agreement, and we've been just promoting each other's work. And her work is just fantastic. If you go to her page, Succulent Floor, this is a very talented young woman. I actually interviewed her on Instagram Live. So if you find my Instagram page, I think I might have shared it to my Facebook as well, the link anyway to that interview.
Oh, I'm gonna see if I can pull it up on the computer here and link to it in the banner.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Yeah. She's definitely, English is not her native language. I do not speak her language. And there she was, like, according to her, struggling to articulate. I understood her perfectly. And more than anything, her spirit and her heart. and she just talked about how she was attracted to art because she always struggled to verbalize her emotions, and her spirit and her heart. So she would draw. She was an artist. And now I'm seeing her blossom. Yeah, she would talk about, like, first she asked me, like, what the heck is mojo? Because that doesn't translate so usually.
I did see she posted a story, right? And she was like, what is mojo? And even the way she told the story of her trying to capture mojo through this cat without a whole lot of words, right? It was like this moving video of her self-reflection. So let me see if I can find it on Instagram so I could link it here.
It's the cutest. It's better than anything I've ever shared about this story. She just is so fantastic.
I love it. And once we do that, I'll feel complete in my life. But it's so not cooperating with me today. And I'm like, why?
Technology. Yeah.
Drive me nuts. I'll link to it in the comments for sure. I think it's also linked in on the Kickstarter, if I remember correctly.
There's a video that I made that definitely features her art, so it's going to look quite similar. But the reel that she made for Instagram, in particular, is just out of this world. It's her process of understanding what is mojo and engaging with the story, and then applying it to herself, because she herself articulated as an adult woman, the times that she didn't feel motivated as an artist, or maybe didn't believe her work, right? That confidence. We all get hit with that, and kids in particular. A friend of mine I was chatting with, he's like, kids have it so hard as young people. I know I had it hard as a young person, and in this generation in particular, there's so many things getting thrown at them. It's going to affect our spirit, right? Their spirit in particular. So yeah, hopefully a little something to teach them to talk about their feelings, to help adults talk with them about their feelings. I have a cat wanting to jump in the window right now. Give me a second.
It's all right. I think I just found the Instagram page here. So I'm going to see if I can put that in the stream, because really the artwork behind this effort is beautiful. It captures a lot vividly in a way that kind of, to me, I feel like it layers on this, not even a cartoonish effect, but it adds a different dimension, if that makes any sense. And people think of visual art as being two-dimensional when it's digital art created in this way. But there's something about the illustrations in this illustrator's particular style that even me in my wordsmithing abilities and my poetic flow just cannot do right by. And so let me get this link for you all here, because I finally think I got it. And we'll grab that.
The cat has jumped in.
The cat was like, I hear you talking about me. I'm coming.
This isn't Buttons. We have, again, crazy cat lady here.
Buttons has friends. Buttons has friends.
Yeah, this is Sylvester, one of the first,
of course,
cats that ever landed on our doorstep. So, yes.
Of course. Let me put this little writer on here so y'all can find on Instagram if my copy and paste wants to work. And while I'm faltering through the switches, gave y'all that disclaimer in the beginning, right? I was not kidding. There's a lot going on here. I can get multiple people in a car with luggage and not leave anyone behind, but ask me about the switches and the multitasking. Had the whole pandemic to figure it out, and I'm still here. So let's see if I can get it to show at the bottom of the screen. That is Succulent Floors Artwork Instagram. I will also link to it once the live streams kind of become static, and you can come back and watch them again. If there's something that you feel like, oh, I jumped right in and I feel like I missed a part of the conversation, fret not, my friends. It'll be there in the restream, in the YouTube channels, in the links, so that you can rewatch and come back and watch again. Because I think finding our mojo is not a linear process. I love that, this is about a cat, and a black cat nonetheless, and that cats are they do not stay where they're supposed to stay, right? And supposed to in air quotes. You cannot confine a cat. And for as much as I thought I was a dog person, I'm already in love with Buttons. So there's that, right?
Maybe you'll adopt a cat after that.
Yeah, and all that to say that getting your mojo isn't a linear process. You're gonna have your mojo, and then 2 days later, you're like, "What the hell happened with my mojo? Who rained my mojo out?" Right? And so it's a process. It's a dance. It's a constant layered self recovery. And when I say self, that includes our communities, the abuelitos, the kids, the cats, the dogs. Right? It is a very much a communal process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's why our stories as artists and writers of color are important to tell, because we conceptualize so many things in ways that make so much sense and in ways that are sometimes discarded or dismissed as weird. And they're not, right? They're ways that we grew up with. They're ways that are relatable. They're ways that people connect to across space and time, right? They're ways that help us collectively thrive.
Yeah.
So, Brenda, in this final little portion here, because I don't want to keep you on, for an hour and a half, we can do that. We know. Any parting thoughts or words or consejos and or plugs, shameless promotions that you'd like to throw out into the room?
Yes, all of it. First, a word of encouragement, as Rosanna was just saying. Mojo is not linear. Our motivation, our creative drive, our confidence in how we live our lives, it's never going to be always at 100%. There's some days where I'm like, I am that woman, and nothing can stop me. And then days where I'm like, why do I even bother? So, but either way, like with whatever emotions come to us, the way is forward, right? The way is forward. There's times where we do need to look back, self-reflect, take time out, rest, regenerate, but eyes to the front, right? We got to move forward. As a storyteller, like I have stories to tell, and I waited a long time, so it's not going to stop me. And I just want to encourage anyone who might be listening to this, if there's something that you want to do out in the universe, it's just a dream that's been on your heart. And I share this a lot with young writers that come up to me at readings and whatnot. It's like, don't stop. Believe in yourself. Believe in your voice. At the end of the day, that's the mojo that we conjure, right? To that self-empowerment, taking up the space, claiming our power, and adelante, arriba la bandera, right? That's the way it is, in the non-nationalistic way, of course. And my shameless plug, Buttons needs all the help he can get with his mojo. I as a writer, as a publisher, unfortunately, I do not have that trust fund. So I do rely on community support to fund these projects. So, the song I've been hearing this morning is sending out an SOS, sending out, right? Because the Kickstarter, it's so funny, but it's also the universe with a sense of humor. With Kickstarters, poetry books hardly ever make it. They hardly ever meet their goal. With Kickstarter, it's 100% or nada, 100% or nothing. It's not like GoFundMe, where no matter what your goal is, you can cash out and get whatever people pledge. Kickstarter, if you don't hit 100%, ya estuvo, at least with that particular platform, with that particular campaign. My poetry collection, man, I hit that goal. It was like a miracle from the divine. This children's book is struggling, but of course
there is still time for a miracle, folks. And I think 6 days is enough time to make it even less of a miracle by getting that funding level hit before the final stretch. 6 days is a lot of time, right? It's a lot of time to correr la voz, share this with someone, say, save Buttons. We got to read Buttons. Buttons needs to come to life. Fact is this going to happen? Regardless, for sure. But can we show an investment in our communities, in our cultural storytelling, in the ability of women to create their own paths and bring others with them? That's what you're investing in, folks. So if children's books are not your jam, there's so much to invest in with this effort that symbolically, tangibly, you will help move this legacy forward a whole lot faster. So we got 6 days, and I wanted to make sure that Brenda had a chance to roll on in here and do that pitch, right? To give us that 6-7 days of lead time to be like, all right, we still got this. I've seen crazier things happen. I think we can do this. I've seen PBS and KQED raise money and, giving you their chucherias to do that. And I will say, if you send me a screenshot and say I donated to the Kickstarter, I'll have something in the queue for you. Not sure exactly what yet. Maybe some digital artwork, maybe a nice little postcard mailer, quien sabe. But, incentives. And I'm willing to contribute in that way too. And so that you can help me also invest in Brenda's efforts, you can buy me a coffee by my website, rosannaalvarez.com. I'll link it on the hellachingona.com site as well. You can find all of this on my link tree that you link to by way of any one of my platforms, whether it be, let me list them, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. You can find my link tree. It includes the link to this video on the replay. I'll include the link to the Kickstarter, and you can buy me a coffee there. If you've been listening, if you just started listening and you want to show value alongside your appreciations, let's do this so that we can invest and reinvest, not just in women's work and community work and storytelling, but in our damn selves, right? I think Dolores Huerta loves to remind us, nobody's going to save us. Nobody's going to come on a white horse and save us. And I am all for that. The beautiful thing, though, is that we also come from brown communities of color with relatable stories across differences, across cultures, that it doesn't matter who you are in the world. No amount is too small to help us, save ourselves through these stories. Show some love for the babies with some words on a page. Your investment is funding that and a whole lot more. So $5, $2, whatever it is, let's move that little meter. And with that, my friends, are we good, Brenda? Do you have any lingering thoughts that just didn't make it out?
We're good. No, me estás haciendo llorar. The mojo, the last parting word, mojo, sometimes it's our self-love for one another, but sometimes it's also that community care. Like we can nurture each other's motivation, confidence, drive. And Rosanna, you did that for me today again, and you've done it before in the past, and I know we will do it for one another moving into the future as chingonas, as hella chingonas. And so thank you so much for sharing your platform, your voice, your palabra, and you fanned my mojo. We're not stopping here.
And that's what it's about, right? So I'm here. The purpose of the podcast was to do a little bit of that and a little bit of this and really keep our momentum on lock. It's rough out there and we can be soft with each other. And so I'm thankful that you all stopped by today. Hit us on the replay, share this with a friend, throw a couple of dollars and cents on over to investing in us and our stories. And with that, my friends, thank you for listening to the Hella Chingona podcast and reviving my little virtual live stream here. I always enjoy it. I feel like it gets us that much closer to connecting and moving our collective goals forward. This is a collective effort. And I appreciate all y'all that have been rolling with me from the beginning or maybe just came across us today. You're a part of a community. We got you. I got you. We got each other. Brenda, thank you so much for coming through. I will visit you down in Whittier very soon. Fingers crossed. Y'all want to get me there faster? Buy me a coffee.
Buy her a coffee.
I got to get there. We got to shift in space. Muchísimas gracias. I'll see you soon, mujer. Until next time, folks. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.